That's it. We are live. Today is Saturday, the 29th of September 2018. We're here extra. We have Jon TheMorgile with us. Oh, is that me?
Hey, Karen.
We're here extra. We have Jon TheMorgile. Oh dear, it's me. I'm really sorry. I don't understand. I turned my live feed off. It was me. I've turned it off now. Very sorry about that, everybody. So, Astral, Patricia, hello, and Jon TheMorgile. Good afternoon. Good morning to you.
Hey,
Hello, everybody. I'm just going to switch devices because I've just noticed that I've got a glitch on this or something. So I'll be back in 1 second. All right. But hi, Jon and Patricia, Karen, and all in the chat.
Hola, muchachos.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Patricia's not going to say anything because her son's there with her and she's listening in, but she's already said hello. Before we came on, I didn't know whether we were going to talk about this or not, but we were talking about YouTube. I was just saying, and then you continue, Jon. I was just saying that it's a very strange place that, you know, that they allow the link to be shown and anybody can show it and then anybody can get in, rather than it would be a very easy piece of software to make sure that the link never showed to the public. And then, you know, if anything happens to you, you write to YouTube, they can take 6 weeks to answer you. By then it's gone, whatever. You're either dead or alive. And then they send you to the most ridiculous places and where you can't get help. There's no help. And yet they're in charge and they can flag and they can do whatever. That's what we were talking about, wasn't it, Jon?
Yeah, and I think I was sort of mentioning that what sort of baffles me when it comes to scientific documentary videos, it's like you can find, for example, one of the things that I remember specifically was the Brian Cox NASA vacuum chamber video where like they drop a bowling ball and a feather in the vacuum chamber. And if I remember using probably like not even 30 seconds of that video, like 5 seconds of that video, and as soon as uploading it, getting a copyright takedown strike for that. And fair use, you would think, would be definitely applicable to science documentary videos, especially if you're critiquing the experiment and having your own sort of input on the video. But with that specifically, and another one more recently, is the very first spacewalk, allegedly, of the first NASA astronaut. And I think it looks a lot like claymation, but I used that in a video, and they blocked the video worldwide. And it was sort of a glitch in YouTube. I was unable to appeal it. I actually emailed YouTube support about that and have not gotten a resolution, I don't think. But, the thing is first of all, why the hell does the BBC own NASA's very first spacewalk, the rights to that footage? That's a little fishy to me. But then also, where's the presumption of innocence when it comes to these sort of really core First Amendment issues and obviously applicable under the Fair Use Act issues? Like you would sort of expect them to, if there was a copyright claim on one of your videos, for them to not do any, not take any sort of action until the claimant is able to prove that it is a copyright violation. Because 99.999% of the time when I get copyright violation claims, I appeal them and I win the appeal. It's very rarely that you don't. And really sometimes it's just you don't feel like going through the appeal process for that particular video. But it is kind of stupid. It's crazy, really, that scientific documentary evidence, footage of scientific experiments are copyrighted, and not only just copyrighted, but vehemently defended. If anybody has an opposing viewpoint of what they're claiming in the science videos, it's like that instead of debating against those voices, they just shut them down on social media. And so that is kind of scary that we're entering that sort of an Orwellian censorship age on social media, especially YouTube, when, goodness, I would venture to say that YouTube would never have become as popular as it is if it weren't for all this sort of kooky conspiracy theory stuff that you find on there. Am I alone on that?
No, I agree with you. I can only go on what's happened to us, and I don't know if you're aware, but I don't know how many months ago it was now, 4 months ago, something like that. Accidentally, Aaron Project Lumin Aaron, he accidentally showed the link, and then this porn bomber came in and he just locked us all out, and I just couldn't stop the hangout. He was able to show a gun saying, you know, you're dead, and then basically put a horrible porn video up. Well, I managed to not let it render, and I deleted the hangout, and then I wrote to YouTube immediately going like, help, nothing. And then Patricia found this article which said about that link. They know they've got this glitch, but they're not taking it out. And then you realize that YouTube is owned by Google Hangouts, and Google Hangouts are the people with the glitch. So it's all a bit sus, isn't it? So I wrote in and I said, what's this article? It says here, you know about the glitch, and I'm not getting a strike for something you know about. And I carried on writing like this. I'm going, do I need a solicitor? They spent 6 weeks writing to me, and all they put was, if you've got a strike, go to the strikes. That was it. This person threatened us, put a gun up, you know, you're dead. Nothing from them.
Yeah, and that's crazy, and that's really about the same thing that I got when my channel got the last community guideline strike for. I did sort of the same thing. I inadvertently revealed the Hangout link, and I know exactly who got on there and started just playing porn. And I was able to end that and end the stream within, you know, it was at the very end of the stream where they popped in, and I ended it pretty quickly after that. But within a couple minutes, that video was obviously, it was taken down for a community guideline strike. And I emailed YouTube back and forth several times over the audit. And yeah, ultimately they did. At first they tried to play stupid and say, well, like, it doesn't appear that your account was compromised. It doesn't look like your account was hacked. And so I messaged him back. I said, well, it wasn't hacked per se. It's like, and I explained the issue. And so then finally they admitted that, you know, in so many words, that they admitted that they knew about it, and that basically they weren't going to take the strike away. They weren't going to do anything to fix the issue, and obviously they're not going to restore the video either, when it would have been very easy to edit out the last 5 minutes of that video and get rid of the strike. But they're not going to go that far. You know, they're just going to censor us, and if it happens to be because a troll broke into our Hangout because of one of their system's issues, that's a known issue. It's just crazy.
Something I sat all weekend because I managed to delete it straight away. Like at the moment I came off this Hangout, then I got off the Hangout, I deleted it. But all weekend I sat there going, please don't give us a strike, please don't give us a strike. We didn't get one. It went on.
Get one.
John, they were going, Karen, people were calling me, get it off, get it off.
Yeah.
And he broke, because what it was is, I think unless you've got OBS, there's no way of stopping them. Because I watched the other day when someone came in, there was no way with them getting on would I have been able to cut the Hangout, and they're able to. I think they can delete you from the back chat, the Google back chat. You can go in there and you can delete people. If they get in there, they can delete. So before they've really even come on, they're deleting you, and there's nothing you can do.
Wow. Yeah, some of these Globers have just way too much time on their hands.
It's so boring, really. Do we spend all this time going over to sort of, we'll say, Globe channels, trying to hack them and play porn on them? We don't do any of that stuff. It's just ridiculous.
Oh God! And could you imagine if somebody on the flat Earth side of the argument did something like that?
Well, yeah, it made a video about it.
You'd never hear the end of it, and that it's that sort of thing that would make the news, right? Like flat earthers harassing innocent space hangout. I don't know.
Hey, John, the chat room saying, hi, John. Hi, TheMorgile.
Hi, hey, everybody.
There's Ute, Freeman's, Andre, Terran, Rob. Well, that I can see. They're all going, hi.
What up, everybody?
It's always good to have Jon TheMorgile. We've known you for a while now, and you periodically come on Sun and Moon, and always appreciate it. So thank you, John.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. But yeah, the whole YouTube thing's getting out of control, and I've said this for a while, but eventually YouTube is going to be sort of like the social media platform of the past that everybody laughs about because there's so many better new things. But the only way that's going to happen is if people actually start migrating away from YouTube. And unfortunately, these big corporations have spent a lot of money to essentially condition people, and I guess you could even say brainwash people into sort of an addiction onto their specific platforms. So it's really difficult to get people to migrate away from these platforms, and that gives them a tremendous amount of editorial power in terms of what people find online and what people don't find online. And, I had mentioned this before, but YouTube and these other social media platforms, they have a sort of, I guess you could say, well, they have a lack of liability because you see, if they were considered a publisher, people could sue them for discriminating against them for any reason. And because they have this sort of passive entity like YouTube that is not necessarily a publisher, but they're like a passive platform for other publishers to merely showcase their work online, then they get out of this sort of liability to litigation when it comes to discriminating against people. But when YouTube starts editing and editing their publications, which means censoring the things they don't want you to hear, promoting the things they do want you to hear, putting those little blurbs underneath the videos, like NASA, if you have a video saying space is fake, they put a little blurb and a link to how true NASA is. And they also demonetize channels, demonetize videos that they disagree with politically. And when they start getting into that sort of editorial position, then they are no longer this sort of passive platform that gets them out a lot of this litigation. And I think that perhaps in the near future, what we're going to see, and I'd love to see it, is YouTube and Google getting sued for basically discriminating against people for their beliefs and discriminating against people's First Amendment right.
Something else as well, John. Two things. Other things have happened. Like eBay got too big for its britches, and we've got a bank here called Lloyd's Bank, and they bought everything up. And actually, I don't really like the European Union, but they wanted Lloyd's to disband some of their stuff because they were just getting too big. There was no other market because they bought everything. Halifax is a big company they bought. Scottish Widows, they've got so many things, and they were TSB Bank as well. So the European Union broke it up when they're too big. eBay's the same. But the other thing I find really incredible is that we have all this law. We are sort of pushed with so much law, but there isn't any of that law covers us on YouTube. None of it. The police won't get involved.
Right. And again, the argument is, well, they're not infringing on your rights. It's their platform. They can put whatever they want to on their platform. And if you don't like it, you can basically go somewhere else. That's their position. But the problem is they do have this really monopoly on social media videos. There is really no competition to YouTube in terms of the numbers that they put up. And in this respect, they are and this is where, again, they can get into trouble in litigation, is if they are deemed to be basically a public works, like the telephone company or the water company, they can't, like if you write, or let's say you make a video saying how bad your local power company is, they cannot shut off your power, for making that sort of a video. They can't discriminate against you, their public work, because of your beliefs, your creed. And again, when YouTube is in fact, in many senses, a public works, only just not by technical legal definition, that they are editing, choosing what goes up on their site, censoring people, and in fact trampling on the First Amendment. And eventually, this is going to catch up with them, and they're not going to be able to get away with it. However, they are the ones with billions of dollars that have lobbyists and have, paid off governors and Congress people for sure, contributed to their campaigns. And so if anything's going to happen, the way things are going, is they're going to have laws written into existence that protect and condone their behavior and ensure that they have no competition ever in the future. Which is exactly why we have anti-monopoly laws and anti-cartel laws. And I don't see YouTube and these other big corporations any different than like the mafia in many respects.
Yeah, I just think that unfortunately they're too big for their britches now, in a sense, and you can't even. YouTube's so hard to get in touch with. It really is, and it spends weeks and weeks writing back. By then, it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the weird thing when I put out the fake space compilation video recently, and what happened is it got 2 different copyright claims, and it got blocked worldwide because of the one of them, which was again the first NASA spacewalk that clearly looks like claymation and definitely is fakery.
Yeah,
When I tried to appeal that,
like I said, we've got all this law, which, you know, here looking out this window covers me, but not on the screen. You know, so we can be bullied. Anybody can write anything about you. The police won't get involved, and I just find that really strange because we're put on this public platform. There's no protection whatsoever.
yeah, right. And so like with that video, when I click the link to appeal the blocked worldwide decision, it's an error. It takes me back to my main video page, and it gives me an error at the top that says basically there is no video with that link that has been blocked or taken down.
You can't find out really what the problem is. They never explain exactly why they don't like it. They just put that comment up, either you get a strike, a community one, or the other one. It's crazy.
Well, so what I did was I took a 30-second screen recording of me trying to appeal that blocked worldwide decision, and then the error that pops up, and sent it off to YouTube support. And they did acknowledge that it was a glitch and that they had developers working on it, but they had no idea how long it was going to take to fix, and to basically not bother emailing back about that issue. And so yeah, so I had
an eBay shop, John, and what it meant was I had to sort my customers out ASAP. But eBay could do what they wanted, could take as long as they liked, and I was paying for it. And yet the ruling they had you in. So of course we had like a, you know, I don't know if you know eBay, you can put, you know, your likes and dislikes and so forth on it. But eBay don't have the same thing, so you can't vote if they're good or bad. So they put you in a system which they have control over, which you have to be a certain way, but they can do what they like. And as I was paying about £800 a month for this, having a shop there, they annoyed me so much one day, I just went delete. I deleted my shop like that. Delete.
Well, and that's the problem. Oh, go ahead.
No, that was it. I just had enough.
Oh.
Hi, Flat Earth Dude. Flat Earth Dude has joined us.
Hey, yeah, that's the problem with monopolies in general.
Sorry, are you saying hello, Flat Earth Dude?
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
How's it going?
Good. How you guys doing?
Very well.
I'm a little tardy. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a bit early for you, isn't it? Being 8 hours behind.
Yeah, 9:24.
Flat Earth Dude's in California, John.
Oh, nice. Good morning to you.
It is nice here, man. Traffic is not nice, but
Just very
everything
quick,
else is nice.
we're talking about something, Flat Earth Dude, but tell John what you're doing later on.
I'm just going to go to Hollywood and talk to people about where they live, right on the boulevard. I'm going to do it live on Poncho Pete. And I've been doing it about 6 weeks in a row. And it seems that more and more people are coming up and going, yeah, man, I'm with you. We're not living on a 1,000-mile-an-hour spinning toroid.
Yeah, I think I'm going to get me a decent camera and try to do some street activism stuff too, because I really agree that that's going to be a new sort of way not a lot of people are doing to get the word out to strangers who aren't necessarily perusing the YouTube, you know, the flat Earth segment of YouTube very much, if ever.
Right. And it's, boy, last time I went out, they had like a dozen people came up and said, yeah, man, we're with you. It's observably flat. And, you know, all the tests show it's flat. So, and it's not moving. So, and, you know, we call them flat earthers, I guess. But it's a great thing, man, when you get positive reinforcement, you know. For a lot of years, man, we would just get hammered and hammered and hammered. And it seems to be turning a little bit. Not a lot, but certainly a noticeable amount as more people are waking up.
Well, I think where the location you choose to go, it'll have a big impact on the reception that you get as well. So I am interested to see how the people in Hollywood fair because, well, I guess you've got that stereotypical Hollywood environment, but you've got lots of different walks of life in any location. But I guess maybe what I'm saying is like a college campus or something might be a little bit different reception than
Oh
Hollywood
yeah, yeah.
Boulevard or whatever.
My friend Jibby Jedi and brother Ernest, they're planning some trips to MIT to do some. Yeah, we're gonna spread the flat Earth over at MIT. I was like, wow, that's gonna go interesting. So we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, I think that's wise because, frankly, if you can get people who are, because everybody's been indoctrinated and brainwashed by the globe. But the beautiful thing about it is if you can get someone to really actually revisit the topic, the simple stuff, the supersonic spinning and the curvature that doesn't exist, then as adults, that's much easier to say, wait a minute, that really doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem as if we are spinning. It doesn't appear to be any curvature. And so maybe there's something to this, because frankly, the last time most people actually sat down and thought that hard about the globe was when they were just little kids. And, of course, the adult of the conversation is asserting the spinning ball Earth, no matter what you say. And so, yeah, I think someplace like MIT where people have some sort of hands-on technical, scientific background.
I can interrupt there
perhaps.
as well. I agree,
Sure.
because also these people, I mean, they're at MIT. I mean, you can ask them, all right, are you a child, a clown, or a critical thinker? And when you put all these observations that we have, well, what can they do if they are interested? Analyze them, and they can only find out the truth.
So Jibby Jedi a couple weeks ago went up against a Harvard astronomer. Harvard. For about 45 minutes. It's on his channel, Jibby Jedi. Probably Google it or YouTube it or find it. And he was standing there talking to a Harvard astronomer for about 45 minutes. And the guy left buying a Flat Earth t-shirt. So
Nice.
Hey, that's good.
it's pretty good. Yeah. Jibby knows his astronomy. That's his background. And he had no chance. That guy was dead in the water from word one, man. He was, he tried all the typical arguments. You have to watch it. It's absolutely amazing. The audio is a little low, but you can, if you put some headphones on, you can hear it really well.
Right, because I mean, like, we've all heard those same old arguments our whole lives about, all the different reasons why they think the Earth is a ball. But when you actually go to skeptically review and see if those assumptions hold any water, it's just ridiculous. I mean, all of the so-called evidence for the ball just falls apart under logical scrutiny, scientific testing. And if you can get someone to just revisit this topic, the first thing that they do as a knee-jerk reaction is recite all of that programming. But lo and behold, every single one of those things has been debunked, and they must assume that people who are flat earthers have never heard these arguments about Columbus's ships over the horizon and the time zones and just all these ridiculous things that are presented to us as exclusive to a ball Earth, but in fact are not exclusive to a ball Earth, and really all of the things that supposedly prove a ball Earth work very nicely on the flat Earth. And so there's really no debate. It's just a matter of getting people to review the evidence and to realize that they've been just fully deceived about pretty much everything.
Hey, John, yesterday Ditra sent me a link. I think it was Marty Leeds, and he was doing this cognitive dissonance, and it's not cognitive dissonance. For those that actually have come across flat Earth and say that, they're cowards. That was the word. It's not cognitive dissonance. For those, they're cowards.
Yeah, Marty was talking about his friend who was kind of looking into the truth for a while, and then Marty moved away and then came back and visited, and the guy totally flipped back to the globe and didn't want to hear about it, and he just called him a coward instead of cognitive dissonance. So.
Yeah.
Hey,
well,
John, nice eclipse presentation the other night. I watched all of it later on. I didn't catch it live, but good
Oh,
stuff,
thank
man.
you.
Thanks.
Yeah, man, there's just so much wrong with eclipses. And one of the things that I mentioned on that video yesterday is something I hadn't really talked about much, but I think it's a very valid point that what's going on with an eclipse, and it's kind of hard to explain without diagrams, but you've got basically a crosshairs, a latitude and longitude crosshairs of where the shadow of the moon should be during a total solar eclipse. And that the moon's shadow should technically be directly on whichever meridian is directly facing the sun, and it should be at whatever latitude happens to be, conducive to that season. So if it was at the equinox, then the moon's shadow should be directly on the equator. If it was the northern summer, then the moon's shadow should be directly over the Tropic of Cancer, and so forth. And yet we see signatures, eclipse signatures, where the moon's shadow traverses the North Pole, traverses the South Pole, and happens at all different range of times throughout the day. Certainly not directly at high perfect solar noon. And so, this is just one huge problem with the ball Earth theory that I think, in many ways, the shadow of the moon totally debunks the ball Earth model. There's very seldom instances in reality where what's going on in the celestial area can be tangibly measured and scrutinized here in reality. And the moon's shadow it's really one of the only examples of this I can think, where we get an actual readable, tangible result in terms of what is the actual size of the moon. And that shadow is often 50, 60, 70 miles in diameter. And if you try to apply that to the ball Earth model, it really doesn't make any sense. The one instance where we should have evidence of this 2,000 mile diameter, 250,000 mile distant moon, you get this little tiny shadow that really just flies in the face of the ball Earth theory. And you have this other element of it that I just described, where the shadow of the moon should be strictly really a tropical phenomenon somewhere in between the tropics, and yet there's eclipses where the signature again traverses the poles. And so with so much wrong with eclipses, and there's other things too, but with so many different things wrong with eclipses, it makes you wonder how theoretical physics and astronomy could have been just so absolutely wrong about everything. And when you just take the time to skeptically scrutinize the ball Earth, not just agree with it because that's what you've been told, but to actually look at it and see if it makes sense, it really truly doesn't. And that's kind of scary because, I don't know, we put a lot of faith into science, into astronomy, and even theoretical physics, but it goes to show you that they're just totally wrong. And instead of trying to geometrically refute these sort of points, the ball earthers just invent crap like the umbra penumbra effect, where the sun's light is converging on itself and diverging upon itself to create these really quite bizarre pinpointer shadows of the moon and the earth during eclipses, such shadows which can never be demonstrated in reality, but must be doing this impossible feat in order for the ball earth theory to work. Yep.
Yeah, the
Craziness.
impossible shadows.
Yep.
I like what you said about the lunar eclipse, where how is it possible that a very small portion can see the shadow? If there was a shadow on the moon, everybody that could see the moon could see the shadow.
Absolutely right.
And
Yep.
that just that drives me nuts, man. It's like it's so obvious that
Right. That's another huge point. Because, okay, so the shadow of the moon, yes, that should be at least 2,000 miles in diameter, just like the moon. But certainly it shouldn't be a pinpointer. However, like you said, for any eclipse, if you've got that alignment on the scale that the ball Earth model is supposed to be, you should be able to see the eclipse from anywhere on Earth that's facing, that side of the solar system or whatever. And the fact that eclipses are localized to a single viewable area, a very small, limited viewable area, I think is very good evidence that the sun and the moon are local. There's just no geometrical way to get that sort of thing to work in the ball Earth theory. So much is wrong with it, so much. And yet, instead of actually going through it and deciding for themselves whether the ball Earth theory holds water, people just agree with it because that's what everyone says, and that's a very difficult sort of dogma to go up against, especially when you have all these mechanisms of social media and science and science fiction and just all these really long-term conditioning programs that people have gone through in order to result in this blind belief in the ball. It's very difficult to go up against brainwashing.
Do you even brainwash? Yeah, it's so obvious that the solar 670 mile wide shadow. I mean, come on, that is a 2,000 mile across supposed moon.
You know, can I say something as
Go ahead.
well, please? I don't know if you can hear me all right. Yeah, I'm back again. I just have a problem with the shadow effect. If you take a ball in front of a light source and then you obviously trying to replicate an eclipse, it just doesn't work with me, because I find that the further away you go from where the shadow is projected, or where the shadow is cast, or where the shadow falls, the further away you go, the more diffused it becomes, and the more dissipated it is. So it's barely a shadow then. Then it's like, do you understand what I'm saying? Try it. Make a shadow on the floor with a light and like lift your foot up or something, and you'll see the further away you get, the less it is. But the closer to the ground you get, the darker the shadow becomes, obviously.
And it can never be smaller than the object that's creating the shadow.
Absolutely never.
And do you know something I find really weird? I've said it before. I said it last night. We have somebody in our group who, on Facebook, and who comes on the Hangout sometimes. His name's Robert Kidner. He lives in Mexico, and he's still in the northern hemisphere. And last year, when the eclipse was there, he saw it back to front to you in America, and he's still in the northern hemisphere. It went the other way for him.
Wow. Well, and you mentioned the that's crazy. You mentioned the diffused edges of a shadow when you've got like the shadow traveling a great distance. I really believe, and I think that is only an issue when you're in the side of an atmosphere, because you have the light sort of scattering off and reflecting off of the atmosphere locally. Whereas if you're hypothetically in a vacuum, you wouldn't have that. You wouldn't have the issue of light scattering off of any atmosphere back in towards the shadow area or whatever, because there is no atmosphere. Although, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like the further that shadow goes, the larger it should get in angular size, certainly not smaller. And then when you get rid of the atmosphere, I would argue that you wouldn't even necessarily have that sort of softening of the edges, because you don't have the atmosphere there. But so in Mexico, they saw it go. Do you mean it went from east to west, or the shadow of the totality was, or like the moon was transited in the opposite direction? Is that what he meant? I'm a little confused. Hello?
Sorry, I'm so busy filming the sun here, and I didn't hear a word you said there. Sorry, brother. I am so sorry.
I was asking Karen, but I guess she wasn't on. But
I was muted. I couldn't get my button off.
Oh.
Say again.
No, I was just asking. You said the guy from Mexico. Did he see the like the shadow traversed east to west, or
the eclipse was the other way round for him? I can pass you a link of his eclipse if you want. I'll find it for you.
Okay. Yeah.
Sure. And also, we had Joe Hill, who's in America. He only saw a shadow. Just a shadow went across the sky. The sky was light, and then this darkness went across, and then it went, and the sun looked really weird, when the shadow was there. But he didn't see an eclipse. He just saw a shadow.
Huh. Well, have you guys seen, there was a few years ago a video released of an eclipse, a solar eclipse taken from an airplane window. And during the eclipse, you see like 3 or 4 little orbs in the sky. And then as the eclipse starts to, like the totality of the eclipse starts to go away, the sun washes out all the light and you get the bright blue sky, and you can no longer see those orbs floating around in the sky. Have y'all seen that?
You mean, yeah, they're trying to say that originally, like this is nearly 2 years ago, they were the planets or something, or Nibiru, that kind of
Well,
thing.
I'm not sure what they were trying to say that it was, but the video is it's pretty bizarre. I've never seen anything like that, where what it looks to me, and I could be way off here, but it looks to me as if they may be trying to either fake the eclipse with some sort of a technology, or perhaps there's something to the Rahu and Ketu sort of Vedic argument for what's going on in eclipses. But I haven't seen any real good valid explanation from the mainstream scientific community as to what those orbs are. But I don't think they even claim that they're planets, but maybe they do, but I don't think that's the case.
We still
Maybe
don't
they
know.
do. Maybe they claim it's planets.
We still don't know enough.
Yeah, I mean, how else do you explain it? I have no idea how to explain that other than, like I said, either the Vedic cosmology is onto something, or there's some technology that they're using to block out the sun in order to, for whatever reason, I don't know why they would do that. But the technology is there. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but when you start looking into HARP and directed energy weapons and even real satellites, which are, of course, high altitude weather balloons, certainly not orbiting, little spaceships, they do have the capability to do that sort of thing. And for what reason, I don't know.
Doing to us, John, they show you pictures of satellites and they're all fake and CGI. You get, like, even with the hurricane, there was two, I think twice now, they were showing you on YouTube somewhere that the reporter's like going, it's filling up with water, and he looks like he's half drowning, and then someone walks behind him, and then the other one was windy, it's so windy, and then two people walk normally behind them. And then I came across one the other day when they're supposed to do a satellite link with these two reporters, and then people noticed that the same cars were going by, so they were actually sitting in the same car park pretending they were on a satellite link. So if they're prepared to do all these things to us, what else can they do? And you know that they can computer program these things and they can put you somewhere you're not, make you look like you're talking and you're not ever there, you've never been there, and they can do these things.
Yeah, they get caught doing that sort of thing all the time, where they've got they're pretending to be talking, two different people, newscasters are supposedly talking from remote locations, and yeah, it turns out they're either on the other side of a parking lot, or in one case the guy was claiming that he was in Baghdad during a gas attack, and of course they were right at home in one of the NBC or CBS studios or whatever. Yeah, but they do that crap all the time, and they've been caught so many times. I don't see why people still take them seriously when they have been caught, but
it's
people
really
just want to
funny.
believe what's on the news.
It's really funny when you see those situations, where they have been caught, and like you say, John, there are many of them I've seen as well.
And they still say nothing. They still say nothing. No one's saying, this is disgraceful. No one says anything. Just carry on and pretend like nothing's ever happened. Crazy.
Right, and then like when you look at the number of FFs that have happened throughout history, I mean, just in American history, you've got Pearl Harbor, which if that wasn't a false flag, it was certainly the U.S. administration was aware of it and did nothing to stop it because there were certain interests that wanted America to go into World War II. You've got the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which actually never happened, but that got us into the Vietnam conflict. Then you've got 9/11, Sandy Hook, all these questionable things. And the news media has been complicit really in all of them. If it weren't for the news media either lying deliberately or just repeating what the lying government tells them without verifying it, then they're exactly the reason why the controllers of the world are able to their plans are able to come to fruition. Because if it weren't for the media conditioning people into what they think, they wouldn't have a chance. But unfortunately,
This right. I myself have found two astronauts supposed to be live and one's paused. Now, there's got to be other things like that. If they're watching us, what these people watching us, what do they make of all this? And the other thing is that quite often through clips like that, when things aren't real and people catch them, they get to the news, they get investigated, or someone says something. Nothing's happening. Everybody's pretending nothing's happening. It's just crazy.
Yeah, well, the news media gets specific scripts that they read, and it's like you've got all these different media outlets that seem to be independent, but sometimes you can catch them, dozens of them, reading verbatim the exact same stories on the same day, because they're told what to say, they're told what not to say, and in the few cases where something like
You know what they do as well? Because all these television news companies are owned by one person, basically, they actually say the same things. If you go around the news, they'll repeat the same words. There'll be a specific subversion line which they've got to give out, and they all say the same thing.
Can I add my 2 pence worth? It's called Mockingbird Media, for those that are not aware of it. I know that there are many in the chat that are awake and have known about this kind of stuff going on, but the people that are not aware of it, it's called Mockingbird Media, and all you have to do is research it. It's very simple.
Yeah, it's a CIA mind control operation, basically, where they get their opinions out to the public through the media, through repetition, basically propaganda. And, you know, that sort of, they also use subliminal triggers and subliminal neural pathways that they've spent a long time setting up these neural pathways that they're able to access with subliminals. And that sort of thing was illegal for a long time, but relatively recently, I want to say within the last 15, 20 years, it is no longer illegal, at least for the United States government, to use subliminal mind control programming on the citizens. So, you know, what they did was they essentially changed the laws to condone things that they were already doing and had been doing for a long time. But at least now, if they get caught, or every time they get caught, they can say, well, we weren't breaking any laws. And this goes for everything from like the Iraq War to 9/11 to, you know, all the way, it really goes back in history, at least in the United States, all the way to World War II and actually World War I as well. The main in Spain, which was this whole other false flag that got the United States into World War I, appears to have some very fishy elements to it as well. And, you know, this dovetails very nicely with the Federal Reserve Creature from Jekyll Island book that I'm actually putting that up in audio book on my channel. But you see in the last 100 years that you've got these very nefarious, secretive, ultra wealthy groups of plutocrats who are basically pulling the strings of all of the levers of power in the world. And they've set themselves up to where they are now too big to fail. They have monopolies on all of these critical pieces of the economy. And if they were to go belly up, then the entire world economy would suffer. And so they're given 100% insurance on all of their dastardly and irresponsible acts that they do by our tax dollars. And it's just a huge, big problem that it is very much all connected. But yeah, mind control is the way that they operate it with impunity. Mass mind control.
The Maine and plane falls gently on, or Maine and Spain falls gently on a plane.
Yeah, the Maine and Spain.
Yeah, dude, you need this one. The water in my Yota don't bend like what it oughta. No, let me redo that. The water in my Joker don't bend like what it oughta. The water in my Joker don't bend like what it oughta. Right, I will yield the floor.
What is it for Earth, dude? There's no what?
No bendy water. Where's the bendy water?
No bendy water.
Yeah. Yeah, the news thing, that's interesting.
Can I just say one thing? Marilyn put something in there about 5G, and then someone sent me a video today. This lady, she saw that 5G tower was being put up, and although it wasn't actually working nationally, she started to get all these headaches, and she went to the doctor with all this information about 5G and things like that. The doctor said rubbish, and she basically emailed her. Next thing is she had police and mental team at her door. She was actually, what do you call it when you're sectioned? They sectioned her for to what do you call it, to look at her.
A mental institute or something.
Yeah, she's there now. I can send you the link if you want.
That is incredible. That is bad news. That is.
Yeah, I saw that story. That's crazy. So basically, like, from what I gather, they had recently put up the 5G tower, although the company that put it up claims that the 5G is not yet activated. But after they put up this new tower right by her house, her, and I believe she said some of her neighbors as well, but definitely her, started getting some symptoms, and she was concerned that it might have some correlation to that tower. So she went to the doctor and explained this to them, and they basically told her that she was crazy. And I think she got a little bit upset with the doctor, and then she went home. And of course, it was either that day or maybe the following day where she got a knock on the door from, I guess, federal or, workers for the state who ultimately, they call it like Baker acted her. That's what they call it here, or sectioned her, whatever. And yeah, took her away to a mental institution where she was doing the live stream or the interview that I watched. And that's just crazy, but that's exactly the sort of thing that happens when you question these sort of technologies that are, definitely, they're probably very detrimental to our health, but quite frankly, the studies haven't been done to determine just how dangerous they are. And you've got these corporations that are putting them on a fast track to roll them out, as opposed to being a little bit more cautious with these technologies. And anyone who complains or, has any sort of health effects because of it, I believe there is a policy to essentially call them crazy and to do exactly that sort of thing that they did with that woman. It's absolutely insane.
Sounds a bit like this.
Yeah, it's a bit worrying,
kind
isn't
of
it?
an agenda, like, Agenda 21 or something. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and one of the things that she said was when she was trying to explain this to the doctor, like, she got bad vibes. Like, the doctor, this was her, and maybe I'm paraphrasing wrong, but her assumption was that the doctor knew there was something going on and was basically following a protocol to, basically cast doubt on her sanity. And that's scary, man. Like, what do you do in that sort of situation? Like, because eventually when 5G towers are everywhere, they're going to be ubiquitous. They're going to be everywhere, every couple 100 foot. And you're talking about very high frequency microwave uh, RF signals, and microwaves can be dangerous. I mean, it's just crazy that the governments and the companies, the corporations of the world are putting this technology ahead of everyone's health. And they even say as much in their braggadocio press conferences, where they say, no, we're not going to be cautious. We're not going to wait for the medical data to come back. We're just going to roll it out, and we're going to fast track it. So there you go.
John, just to let you know, I've sent you a couple of little videos on Facebook of Robert Kidner in Mexico. He's called Forbidden Parody, or whatever he's called. But anyway, I put his couple of videos in to show you that his eclipse is the other way round.
Okay, cool. I'll check it out. Thank you.
And Robert lives in Mexico, but he's still in the Northern Hemisphere. But yeah, that is crazy. I listened to that story today and I was like, oh my goodness. She's got a good job. She's a project manager or something. So it's not like she's got a list of mental problems anyway, and they stuck her in there.
Well, and here's the thing: even if she did have mental problems, does that mean that the tower is not negatively affecting her health? I mean, can somebody be crazy and still have some faculties about them to know when their body's reacting to something? Because I'm sensitive to that sort of thing. I remember when, like, I lived in a house where they started putting up the wireless meters for your electricity. And I didn't know they had done it until a few weeks after they had done it. But I started getting heart palpitations in the middle of the night because my bedroom, lo and behold, was directly inside from where that meter was. And for a couple weeks, like I was literally getting heart palpitations. I could feel my heart sputtering and not beating correctly. And come to find out that all started happening as soon as they put that smart meter in. And, if you were to, I didn't go to a doctor and tell him that, but if I were to have said something about that to a doctor, that they are pretty much instructed to tell you that you're crazy. In fact, not that long ago, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or less, I went to the emergency room for some reason, and the doctor, took a stethoscope to my heart, and I can tell that my heart's going, like, beating regularly, ba-boom, 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 and then ba-boom, and I can feel it in my chest when it does that, and I know that she heard that in the stethoscope. Her eyes widened because obviously she clearly recognized it, and I said, "Did you hear that?" I said, "My heart does that sometimes, but only when I'm around a lot of, high radio frequency distortion or radio frequency noise." And she basically, told me the same thing. She's like, "Oh, well, that wouldn't have anything to do with it." And no, I didn't hear anything. So, that is circumstantial, anecdotal evidence to the same thing that this woman in the UK is complaining about, that there's this sort of systematic policy to basically tell you that you're crazy if you think that radio frequency waves are harming you. And the scientific evidence suggests that long-term exposure to these radio frequency waves can certainly have negative health effects, but they'll never own up to it. Like, it is pretty complicated. The federal standards for the amount of radiation that you can absorb is the standard is only based on like one radio frequency emitter, and for a limited duration. There are no long-term studies when you're dealing with multiple RF emitters. So like if you've got a smart meter, a Wi-Fi router, your cell phone, and all these different devices that are wireless, you've got all these interference waves going on in the radio frequency spectrum, where it's that interference that can potentially have really bad health effects, although none of that is studied and isn't even considered in the federal regulation numbers in terms of what's safe and what isn't. So it's all very convoluted, but at the end of the day, that they don't have our health in mind at all. It's all about keeping their control infrastructure active and making our devices go faster, and microwaving our brains one day maybe.
Well, they're just experimenting on us. What I feel is that they get you watching all these programs and they're saying they're the animals, and we're going, oh, we don't like how they're treated, and we don't. But on the other hand, we are also the animals. We're treated just the same.
Well, and you mentioned the animals. Look at the bee die-offs. I'm not sure how big of a problem that is worldwide, but I know in the United States and other places, it's a huge problem where you've got just massive colonies. I think they call it spontaneous colony die-off or something like that, where all the bees are basically just not returning to their nest and dying off. And to me, that screams either magnetic or electromagnetic or radio frequency confusion in these hives. That science claims that they communicate through pheromones, which is like smelling little smell glands or whatever. But I suspect that when you've got hive colonies of bees and such, and maybe even migrating birds, I believe that they're using the electromagnetic field of the earth to get their bearings. And when you start introducing radio frequency radiation into that mix, I believe that is a huge contributor to the massive bee die-offs. And so it's like, okay, so what if the bees all die off? Well, if you like things like, well, honey, then you won't get that anymore. But it goes much beyond that. Anything that blooms and relies on bees to pollinate. So if you like coffee, you might not be able to get coffee anymore. If you like any kind of flower, that relies on pollination from bees, you won't be able to get that anymore. And then what about the animals like the livestock that feed on these blooming plants, whatever? It's a chain reaction that's going to go through the ecosystem, where if all of the bees suddenly die off, like it looks like that's the way it may be going fairly quickly, there's going to be huge ramifications that ripple all the way through the entire ecosystem, right up to the top where we are. And instead of curbing this insane growth in radio frequency emitters, they're expanding it, multiplying it. And that's, it's scary, but it makes you wonder, are there really just absolute psychopaths running shit? Excuse the language.
I just put a link
Yeah,
in.
yeah,
I made
there
a
is.
video myself about cell towers, and I found this web page. They're called Parents for Safety, safetechnology.org, and they have this whole thing up. You should never ever have any of these towers anywhere near children and people.
Right. Yeah. Like the 5G towers, there's basically a radius around them, like a dozen foot or something in any direction, where if you're standing there for long periods of time, you're going to get radiation poisoning, basically. And yeah, there's cases all over the place where people will have a brand new cell tower put up near their home and wind up getting very sick and cancer and just all sorts of really terrible things. And you can't there is no sort of suing these companies that put up these towers. From what I gather, they're protected by some, I don't know exactly how it works, but it's very difficult to get any sort of monetary compensation for these people that are damaging you. Whereas anyone else, like if you run over someone with your car and breaks their leg, or shoot them with a laser beam that burns their skin, or even just touch them the wrong way, you can be sued. Although if you're a cell phone company, you can put up radioactive towers everywhere that have been linked to all sorts of negative health effects, and you basically get away scot-free. And that's the sort of system that is being created in our names for our entire lives, and it's just crazy.
It is. It's just. Again, though, you know what? It's just obvious. They just do what they want to do, don't they? They're doing whatever they want to do. And they'll say, oh, this has happened, and now we know how to sort it out for you by changing the law. That's all it's about.
It's like, if we can't even get them to stop poisoning our water with fluoride, what chance do we have to get them to stop putting up their new technology radio towers?
Yeah.
Not a good one, I don't think. But I think awareness is key to this, because if everybody knew exactly what was going on, I think that they would want to stop it. It's just a very few people at the top of these corporations that really, really want to see these things rolled out and expanded and multiplied and fast tracked. I think we could fare okay with 4G, although what they've got planned in the future is going to rely upon this whole Internet of Things idea, where every little last thing will be basically RFID tagged. That's where they want to go with this. That's the end game, so that everything from watering your plants at your house, to your refrigerator, to large scale growing operations, industrial, everything, to right down to your medicine bottles, are going to be RFID tags, so they can track everything on this real-time 5G grid system. And that's coming.
Everything else is plastic food, plastic cheese, plastic rice, plastic. We're eating plastic.
Yep. Oh, and plastic gives off just very toxic chemicals. It's sort of like, if you've got water in a plastic bottle, it leaches.
In plastic.
What's that?
You imagine when you buy a bottle of water, it's all in plastic.
Right. Yep. And it's widely known that certain types of plastic, especially like baby bottles, once they've been heated up in the washing machine, or even in hot water several times, even when they're brand new, they emit these toxic chemicals. I forget exactly, but they're carcinogenic. Like it may cause cancer and have all sorts of health problems. And yeah, everything's plastic. Even the IV bags that you get with saline at the hospital is filled with in plastic. And nobody really seems to care. It's everywhere. But yeah, I mean, it is something poisonous, where actually you can make hemp-based same thing, plastics that are totally biodegradable, non-toxic whatsoever. And that's exactly the sort of reason why pot was made illegal, was to promote things like nylon and plastic by these super corporations like DuPont, who wanted to corner the market on these sort of fibers and plastics. And so pot was a huge threat to that empire. And you can make so many things out of pot. Like reinforced pot can be stronger than steel and lighter, like 10 times stronger than steel. Maybe I mentioned this last time, but I think it was Henry Ford made an entire car out of pot and fueled it with pot. Yeah. But you don't read about that anywhere.
Yeah, we don't even read about the fact that we had electric cars, really. You have to really hunt for it. And that we were totally electric before the First World War. So,
Well, what about the diesel, though? I mean, like, the diesel was invented in the late 1800s, and that thing was running on peanut oil before petroleum was ever even considered for internal combustion engines. And yet we're searching for alternatives to to petroleum. I mean, it's stupid. It really is just stupid.
yes, it is. Hey, John, have you heard anything about Des Walsh?
About who?
He's called Des Walsh. He's in an expedition team. They are on their well. Maybe they're nearly there. They're going to the edge.
Oh, nice. No, I haven't seen that.
I haven't heard anything myself, although somebody put a comment in on the post of the hangout he had the other day before he went that he's been in the newspaper, he's been on a radio show, but I can't imagine that they can do anything, can they? They need to just go and do these experiments, try and get as close to whatever they think is the edge, and then show us what they've done. So we're waiting on tender hooks.
I think the problem with looking for an edge is maybe there isn't an edge, and like I don't know if you
He's a
if you
scientist.
go,
He's a flat Earth scientist. A couple of flat Earth scientists are going. He's a physicist, and he's taking other scientists who aren't flat earthers. There's 50 of them. They're taking different clothes, but they wouldn't say where they were going. They said it would all be done in a few days. They are taking their passports. Yeah, he wouldn't say too much, but they've been planning this for 3 years. They've got £1 million. So yeah, we're just waiting now and tender hooks to see, because obviously we've supported him. A lot of people don't think, he's lying or whatever, but we're supporting him, and we're just hoping that they get something, because Flat Earth could really do with it right now.
yeah, I'd like to see more about that. I would hate to have someone looking for an edge if it isn't there. I mean, not saying there isn't an edge, but what if it keeps going? What do you do then? Do you keep going south until what point?
Who says he's going south? But he reckoned.
Oh, so he's not.
It would peter off. That's all he'd really say. And I suppose what it was is I thought he wants his face up against the edge, but I suddenly thought, oh, they'll be maybe up with drone. They've got drones. They're going to be filming it from wherever distance, but using infrared as well.
Okay, so we don't know where they're going, so he might not necessarily be going south.
No, he wouldn't say, but you can't, because they need to go and do what they've got to do then, don't they? And then leave. And if they say where they are, they're going to be stopped before they go, aren't they?
Right. Well, and see, the whole thing with that is like, I don't know. I'm just assuming that they would be going south. Maybe they're not, but then you deal with all the red tape with the Antarctic Treaty. And so in that respect, if you're going that direction,
I don't think they're going south.
Mm-hmm.
Plus,
okay.
I don't think that they've asked for permits and things. I think this is slightly clandestine.
Right. Exactly. That's kind of was my point. So yeah. Well, I guess I'll just wait to see what they come out with. But any preliminary stuff that that I can look into on that, send me a link and I'll take a look.
Yeah, on Sun and Moon, we had a hangout with him the other day, and he talked for about half an hour, and he talked for about an hour before, but he seems very serious. They're gone now, so they should be on their way back today or tomorrow.
Oh, awesome. Well, that's great.
At least he wasn't going to make us wait 6 months or a year, and then, oh, well, we were GoFunding or whatever it was, and oh, we've lost the money. So at least they're doing it all in a few days, and they've gone.
Yeah, well, that's really cool.
Yeah, so just wish them luck that they do capture something, but we'll find out, won't we? It'll all be over in a few days, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, he's you can't. I've got his email. He was talking about it on Facebook, but he'd only come out with it a few days, like a week ago, say, and Facebook blocked him.
Oh wow. Yeah, there you go. More censorship. And this is, from what I gather, just has to do with a scientific expedition. Like, why would they censor that? And I don't know. It's just crazy. Like, you grow up and we're in this world thinking that, we have this ability to share information and share the truth with the world. Like, I don't know, like you think any sort of breakthrough, whether it's archaeological breakthrough or scientific breakthrough or a flat earth breakthrough.
Well,
um,
can I interrupt you rudely? I'm
yeah,
sorry, John, but on the same thread as well. Yeah, why would you halt people that? I mean, we have autistic people. So 100 years ago, there weren't people that were autistic. They might have been smart people, but not in the sense of in today's world, you know. So why not let people go exploring? What can they discover? What can they find out? Or what can they maybe come up with? You understand what I'm saying? It's like, let us free. Why these restrictions on Antarctica? Why these restrictions on the North Pole? I mean, what? Just let us go there to visit at least. We don't need to flip and build a house or a hotel or a string of hotels like, whoever else might have that idea. No, just let us go and have a little look and a bit of research.
Can't they?
Simple
Can
as.
we, Astral? Because then we'd know we were a spinning ball.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If everybody had the same idea that I had, well, why can't we? Why can't we flip and go? Just let us go. If everyone said that,
We're in a
if
system.
everyone said that, we would no. But if everyone said that and they said no to everybody, then surely people would start thinking, well, okay, something is going on, and that's the point. Something's going on. They're stopping us from knowing. And if we were allowed to go, we can see things for ourselves. I think we owe it to ourselves to find out, don't we? I'm here for myself. I don't know about you lot, but I mean, I want to learn, I want to know, and I want to, expand on myself. I'm not here just to flipping come here, work, and die. No, I want to know, why have they got these restrictions?
yeah, like in Antarctica, the whole treaty with that is so counterintuitive, because it's clear that, like, when Admiral Byrd went down there in the 1940s, and before him it was the Germans and the Russians, were very interested in Antarctica. And Byrd, of course, reported that on their survey they found all sorts of very useful minerals, and coal, and possibly oil and gold, and just pretty much anything you can want to dig up out of the ground that has value. And there's tons of it. And so, like, what you would expect after the 1940s would be, you would expect to see lots of corporations and governments making Antarctica a priority, because, although there's a lot of shipping costs involved, we wouldn't have all of the problems that go along with drilling for oil, oil spills in the ocean, fracking, strip mining our mountains for the last bits of coal, buying oil from our so-called enemies in Saudi Arabia, and all this nonsense that goes on with extracting goods out of the ground, that we could be doing in Antarctica and should be doing in Antarctica, because there's nobody there to contest it. And yet we get the Antarctic Treaty, which is unique in many regards. You can't find many treaties that are signed by so many nations that have been upheld for so long, for so many decades. And there's really no corporate or governmental interest in extracting these loads and loads of resources from Antarctica. It is very much counterintuitive to the whole capitalist, greedy mindset of nations that we're very familiar with. And it is very much out of character for them to basically call Antarctica off limits, and really don't give a good reason other than they want to protect it. They want to protect the pristine continent of Antarctica. But at the same time, they're going to strip mine our mountains, spill oil all in the Gulf of Mexico, and just make a wreck of our backyard, basically, so that the penguins and the non-existent life forms can have a beautiful and pristine Antarctica. Makes no sense.
It's not supposed to, though, is it? Because we're in a system with no beginning and no end.
Right.
Find the beginning or the end or the edge or whatever. They don't want us to, do they? To make us believe we're on a spinning ball, and it's just not our reality. It's just, well.
Yeah, I know. Listen, I don't want to get into this, but I've always, since I was a child, this world belongs to us all. It's everyone's world. It's not, this corporation or that corporation or this country or that country. This was always my belief since I was a child. And I'm an adult now, even though some might not think that. and at times I am a child, but this world still today belongs to us all. And that's what we're failing to understand, that it's been taken over by, you know, this country or that entity or that corporation. Because at the end of the day, it's about making money, and they're all corporations, aren't they? We need to wake up, realize what is happening, because it belongs to everyone, you know, and it makes me laugh that just please see it, you know. I love you all.
Don't you know that corporations are people too? Legally. Yeah, they say that corporations basically have human rights, more or less. They can enjoy the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. And of course, if a corporation does something wrong that, you know, would put a normal person in jail or possibly executed, you can't physically, you know, handcuff and jail a corporation. So in that respect, they're not a person at all. But, you know, that's the sort of legal framework that they've set up so that free, you know, money is free speech, and corporations have a lot of free speech, don't they? But yeah, it's all rigged, man. And I agree. It's the world is supposed to be each and everyone's equally, but unfortunately, you've got these greedy bastards who like to cut a much bigger slice for themselves and then, you know, stick their fingers in everyone else's pie as well. Did
So
I lose
sorry, I
you?
was talking away and I was muted.
I was checking my mute button. I wasn't sure if I lost you. Okay.
It was me. Yeah, well, the more you get into this, the more everything else seems bizarre, don't you think? Astral
Yeah.
says spot on the back chat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
humans with a birth certificate are corpse. Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. Like, it goes back to Sestuit KV. For what purpose do you operate, right? It's like maritime admiralty law stuff, where they've tricked everyone into creating a legal fiction that we operate as within their legal framework. Like, the United States government isn't any sort of representative of our people. It's merely yet another corporation that's based out of District of Columbia, and that corporation has basically all of the military might and control of the government and what we picture it to have, but we ain't part of it. Like, we like to think that we're voting for the new CEO of the country, but in fact we're just voting for the new CEO of that corporation. And so, yeah, they have done a number on human rights, and they've created this legal framework of legal fictions and corporations, and basically putting everyone so that they're out lost at sea, and then claiming our trust. So yeah.
Yeah,
And
everybody's putting their trust in something that's fake.
and putting us
Yeah.
on that citizenship. Did you hear me?
Yeah.
We're all citizens, aren't we? Citizenship. We have a ship as a citizen still at sea, you know, and then we go into an apprenticeship to learn our trade. It's all, yeah. I mean, look
Well, the
into
way
it. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful, because the more we know, the more easier it is becoming to understand. And if anyone's been listening to these hangouts all the time, people like you, John, I mean, you're a wordsmith. I love your, I can't even say the word, your vernacular, your verbality, whatever, you know, you're very, I love you, seriously. But we're losing it because we're blinded by all the distractions. It's all distractions. But when you look into it, it's just absolutely beautiful what they've done to con us, because we've been conned in all societies, in all relationships, in every way. It's incredible. Okay, I yield the floor now.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the way that they've sort of did this whole corporation thing or legal fiction thing is it's a really interesting story, and this is from what I gather, and maybe I'm skipping some bits, but like during the Crusades, you'd have landowners that were going off to fight in, foreign countries. And they'd be gone for years, and sometimes they would never come back at all. Sometimes they would be lost, missing, and they'd come back years later. But so what they would do is they would set up basically trust funds, is what they called it, or they would set up trusts where they would designate either a friend or a family member or maybe one of their subservients to watch over their property and take care of their property while they were gone in the Crusades. And that person would be set up as a trustee. The person who was off fighting the war and fighting in the Crusades was the beneficiary, and you'd have another person who would be the executor of this trust. And so the reason that they set all this up is because you'd have guys that came back from the Crusades years later, and their trustee had now basically taken over their property, called them, basically declared them dead and taken over their property. And so you have these three entities, the trustee, the executor, and the beneficiary of this trust, that this is where it came from. It came from that, the Sestuit KV Act of 1666 that allowed people that were going off to fight in wars to sign their properties and stuff over to a trustee for safekeeping, but you would get disputes in this. And so now 500 years later, 400 years later, or whatever, they have taken these same laws on the books and used them to where when you're born, your parents get a certificate of live birth, hand that over to the hospital, who then in return gives them a birth certificate. And basically what they've done is handing you that birth certificate is the legal fiction. And they basically declare your physical body, the actual living, breathing person, as lost at sea. Like you're off fighting the Crusades and you got lost at sea. And then by doing this, they're able to become the trustee and beneficiary of your trust. So it is all pretty complicated and convoluted, but all the way up to the judiciary level, when you go to court, they're still operating under this sort of legal framework, this fiction that was all set up under this idea of the prosecuting attorney being the executor, the judge being the trustee, and you being the beneficiary. But then they sort of switch playing these roles around at different key times during any sort of legal hearing. And it is all very confusing, but my thing is if a contract is signed under duress or I'm not aware of it, it's null and void. And I never signed anything. I never signed my birth certificate allowing them to claim that I'm, off at sea. And I've even heard that they scrape up bits of placenta and keep that locked somewhere in a safe with your DNA so that they have the moral authority to claim that they have your person, and the rest of you is lost at sea. It's crazy.
Yeah, and even just putting us in that, for goodness sake, what have they done? Most people don't even know. Most people are, like, people can't wait to go and get their babies, their birth certificate. They're proud.
Right. And like, so another part of this is apparently when you're born, and I've never been able to verify this, but I've heard this claimed a few times. When you're born, they'll they scrape the placenta up and capture it in some sort of a, I don't know, tube or something. And they put an ad in the paper saying that, your name, the actual person, not the fiction, is lost. And if nobody goes to claim you, that bit of placenta, if nobody goes to claim it within X amount of time, 90 days or whatever, then that's when they're able to legally act as your beneficiary, trustee, and executor, or whatever the case is.
Can I just thank you for that, John, because that is something worth researching seriously. I saw once, sorry to interrupt you, on the same subject, about the placenta, that the placenta is weighed and it's actually considered but dead at birth, I do believe. And
right.
But they register it and they give it a number and everything, and it's this is all documented and this is all verifiable on the internet. I've seen it myself, and that's the way basically that they do it. You have a person, which is like when you were born, and the placenta. The placenta is your straw man. That's what
Right,
they've done.
and it would also have some of your DNA as well, and so some of your DNA as well, and so maybe that's how they justify it to themselves, is that it is, it's actually your DNA there. And what's scary too is how much, DNA evidence is weighed in court of law. Um, I sort of like watching the stories where people, well, it's heart-wrenching, but people get wrongly convicted and then years later DNA evidence exonerates them. And there's been so many people that have basically rotted in jail for decades for things that they absolutely didn't do. And really, if you look at the court cases where they were convicted, there was no evidence against them. It's just the police, when there's some kind of a heinous crime, they really love to pin it on somebody, and whether that person is actually guilty or not, if they've got a gut feeling about them, they'll basically frame them. And this happens all the time, all the time. And yet DNA evidence often exonerates these people. However, if they are, and I'm just postulating here now, but if they have access to your DNA at the time that you're born, they could very easily create a DNA database, which in some respects may be a good thing to help catch serial killers and things like that. But on the other hand, when you find these instances of crooked cops and crooked medical examiners and crooked crime lab employees that are doing DNA tests, when you find out how much corruption there is in the legal system, it's kind of scary to think that they would have a DNA database of everybody, even non-offenders, since they were babies, because they could very easily, you know, uh, plant DNA evidence that suits their narrative conveniently, or they could have cross-contamination going on, and it's just scary. And you've got a lot of people that are now willfully volunteering their DNA to things like Ancestry.com and getting back, results in terms of what their race is. But
Can I say it's way too corruptible and so easily corruptible as well. Anything to do with you can just see it, can't you, for yourselves?
Right, yeah. I mean, it definitely is. And anytime you've got human beings operating in a capacity of authority, at some point you're going to have corruption, period. Not saying that all human beings are corrupt, but eventually, you're going to find corrupt human beings. And I've seen cases where uh, medical examiners or the guys that are responsible for testing the DNA were caught basically fabricating evidence in lots of different cases. One guy in particular had his own semen, in a semen thing that he was testing for a murder trial. And it's just when you've got if they were to have a DNA database of everybody from the time that they're born, yeah, it could be open to corruption, open to all sorts of problems. But what I was saying was you've got people that willfully volunteer their DNA to places like Ancestry.com, and I wouldn't do that. I mean, from what I gather, they are building DNA databases for the criminal justice system, using these sort of ancestry mouth swab things to get people to do it willfully, because the government would love to force everyone to mouth swab their DNA for a database. They'd love it, but they can't force you to do it. It's unconstitutional, at least for now. However, if a private corporation comes along and says, "Oh, we'll tell you what your ancestry is if you give us our DNA," and on the back end of that, they could very easily, and it appears some of them are caught selling that information or giving that information to the government for these databases. And some of these crimes, I'm actually very interested in this aspect of it. Some of these crimes are solved by DNA of someone's family members. So, like, if they've got DNA from a crime scene, they can go to Ancestry.com, and if they find a dozen people with similar DNA patterns, they can tell that it's in that family. And so it really is it's a brilliant tool for sleuthing and for catching criminals. But at the same time, you always have that double-edged sword, the other side of that token, where that sort of technology will be used for corruption. It will be used to frame innocent people at some point, even if it's just one person ever. And how are you going to fight that murder trial or whatever the trial is? They've got your DNA evidence. There's really nothing you can do. But if it in fact was planted, or if it was mishandled, or if you were framed, which does happen, then you're basically screwed at that point. Oh, are you muted?
No, we're here, and we're just listening to you, John. we're just listening to you.
Yeah. So, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just couldn't get my button off. Yeah, I agree with you. It's all just mind-boggling, the whole thing.
Because, I'd love to see serial killers get caught. And if it has to do with DNA, I think that's even better. But if you just look at the rare cases where people are wrongfully convicted because of corruption and framing and irresponsible medical examiners, and it is scary, because then you're dealing with...
Prisons are all to do with money, aren't they? And a lot of people are probably innocent, and they didn't care about that. They just wanted people in prison, or they wanted to look like they'd solved the case. And a lot of these cases now, with people maybe 10 years ago, their cases are being re-put through because there's more DNA evidence now and everything. But it's just horrible. The whole thing is about money, isn't it? Prisons are money, government's money, doctors are money. Everything's about money. Money, 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 not about the people.
Right. And it's funny money. I mean, the money is created by the Federal Reserve, which is not federal and holds no reserves. They basically invent money out of thin air and loan it to the government at interest. And by doing this, they're completely devaluing the dollar through inflation. They get insanely wealthy at the very top at the expense of everyone else. And the money that everyone is fighting over is becoming less and less and less valuable every day. In the early 1900s, a dollar was a lot of money. Now, it's basically nothing. It's worth less than a nickel of what it used to be 100 years ago. And this is all post-Federal Reserve. And when you look at the inception of the Federal Reserve, it was definitely 100% a scam by the big money trusts, by the big bankers, to get a monopoly on our monetary supply. And in doing so, they have the entire weight of the federal government at their fingertips. They've got everything locked. And until people realize and refuse these Federal Reserve notes and replace the Federal Reserve System with some other sort of currency, we're all slaves to this system. And it doesn't matter if you're a doctor or a criminal. Yeah, the end game is this funny money that was created out of thin air and holds no real value other than the faith of the American people and the faith of the world. And it's it's gonna collapse eventually.
That's the sad thing when you think, like, maybe 15 years ago. We're not talking about now because we know what we know now, or we've woken up. But think of all those people proud to go in the army, all these things. Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, and I think there was a time when there was some pride in that. That's one of the greatest historical honors, is to be, a soldier and to die for your country and for what is right. But I mean, really, when was the last war where people did die for what is right? I don't think I can think of any. World War II, I used to think pretty highly of the people, and I still do. I think highly of the people that volunteered and sacrificed their lives for the country. But if you actually look at what was the real motives behind World War II and all these other wars, it was absolutely, it was nothing.
Like, you should vote because your parents or your family fought for freedom, so vote. You need to vote, and all that is just, you're only voting for the system, and they're lying about the wars, and that's in their system, so it's all rubbish. But just yeah.
Well, like my grandfather was going to Harvard School of Engineering when Pearl Harbor happened, and he cut his Harvard career short and entered it was the Air Force Army when they were still together. Entered that as an officer and became a career military man. And he thought he was entering the Army for something that the Japanese did that was horrible, and it was justified for us to go into the war. But when you realize that the president at the time knew that the attack was coming, did nothing to stop them, didn't, certain communications weren't dispatched to the right people, so this thing was allowed to happen just so that these big bank interests could cash in on wars. Wars are extremely profitable to these people. The governments have to borrow money from them, which they just will into existence out of nowhere, and then pay them back with interest, and they guarantee those loans with our tax dollars forever. So basically, we're leveraging our grandchildren's future for the sake of instant, insane profits for these psychopaths who are already wealthy beyond measure. They just want your slice of the pie and mine and everyone else's as well. And so I don't see, I don't have any sort of honor in that anymore.
They've lied about our history. They've lied about what we can't trust any of them.
Yeah. Yep. Certainly not the ball earth.
Observatories, they all need to be arrested, pretending that they're light years away, the stars, when they're only flipping miles away. They need to be arrested. Imagine what they're looking at with those telescopes that they've got.
Right.
Telling us they're light years away when they are probably right inside the star. Because, I mean, even Joe Hill and Flat Earth Dude here do really well on their telescopes. And look at the telescopes they've got. They all need to go to prison.
Well, and I think with a ground-based telescope, you've got some limitations, even with the best, largest optics. You've got some limitations in terms of the atmosphere itself. And when you get the Hubble images, it's just ridiculous because they're clearly created CGI artwork. But the stuff that NASA can see from Hubble is so much more detailed than what you can get on the ground. Nobody from the ground can replicate what NASA's allegedly doing in orbit. And, you know, if you push anybody that believes in these Hubble images on it and say that they're faked, that they'll argue with you till they're blue in the face how they can't be faked.
Marsh has told us, and we'd really like to see it. If they take any photographs there, then there'll be metadata on those photographs. Wouldn't we like to see that metadata of where they actually took the photograph?
Yeah, really. Yeah, it's like Photoshop editing throughout all of the metadata.
Just a simple thought of that action, you know, getting metadata from how far away, and you know, I mean, all right, it's bits and bytes supposedly, but I mean, it's just the more I think about it, the more I laugh. I'm seriously thinking of becoming a comedian because this is just a joke. It is. The more you look into it.
Yeah, really.
Boy, it's just ridiculous. I mean, like, even a bit like, it's a slight change of subject, but it's about the same thing. You know, when you think you get in an aeroplane, the captain doesn't say, hey, not only are we doing the speed of the aeroplane, but we'll be picking up 400 or 500 miles an hour now because we're going down to Florida. I'm coming to see you, John, and you're spinning faster than me. They never talk about these things. You know, aeroplanes would have to be like spaceships. They'd have to have all these meters on there. It's just the whole thing. It's like, people need to think. They need to think.
Yeah, it's tough, but like people that have been indoctrinated by this system, especially to the college level, it's just very difficult to come to the conclusion that they've been wrong. I mean, think about your personal journey from globe earther to flat earther, however long that journey was. There was definitely some doubt in there. Like, I know I doubted my own sanity for a while there when I started really considering this. And we just have to remember that and remember that maybe we're a little bit more open-minded than other people. And maybe it's because of all the acid we did. No, I'm kidding. But like, no, really, like, we can't be mad at people necessarily for not being able to go, to follow those steps to the obvious conclusion that the Earth isn't a spinning ball. I mean, it is very obvious once you get it, but there are just so many layers of programming involved that some people are just not capable of going through that introspection and saying, well, man, am I crazy, or was I really wrong this whole time? And only by doing that can you come to the conclusion of truth. But you know, we can't hold it against people per se if they're not able to do that as easily. Maybe it'll take them.
It upsets me just a little bit with flat Earth. It's a bit like, for us that wake up, it just changes everything for you. You don't want to watch the television. There's just so many things that change. And then you're really happy with the enlightenment. You feel you can reach out to many more people, but you turn around and look at all your friends and family and the people around you, and they think you're crazy. And it takes you away. And sort of separates you for the one thing that the reason that we're all here, even in the chat room, everybody in the chat room, is because we've woken up and we want to connect. And it's the very thing, it sort of stops you in your personal life. No one wants to connect with you. They all think you're crazy or whatever. And so it takes you apart. And that I find is the upsetting bit. Flat Earth's all about waking up to who you are, and then helping others, moving on. You've got to know who you are, or you're never going to believe or agree on anything. So you need to know who you are as a person, and that's what Flat Earth has come in for a lot of us. And then you move on with the whole. And yeah, it's just so sad on your personal life. Everybody around you just, I mean, like I'm saying, John, here, you can find Silbury Hill in the pyramid of the world. It's all over the internet as a pyramid. Yet anybody around here doesn't know it's a pyramid. So what does that tell you?
Right. Yeah. Wow. Is that one that looks like a mountain?
Well, Silbury Hill is right by Avebury, the stone circle. I just saw something else which Skyfly sent me, which is really crazy. They've looked at some parts of the moon, and they're saying, and this is somebody who's not a flat earther, by the way, so I won't mention their name, but they can see that it matches up with the moon. There's a certain section of the moon which matches up to exactly where Avebury and Silbury Hill are. It's exactly the same. Even the markings on the ground match up to the moon. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, Silbury Hill, it always has been a man-made hill, but they're just saying it's a mound of earth. And we've had someone on our channel, and also Brian Forrester knows, all these people know it's a pyramid. Yet the people around here don't know.
So has someone gone and like taken ground penetrating radar over it to see like?
Well, what happened was in the early 2000s, the top of it caved in, like a circle appeared, a hole, and it enabled people to go in there. And those that went in, some of them, because obviously some people aren't looking for it to be a pyramid, are they? But this guy, John Cowie, he's written a book about it. He just talks about it. It's a pyramid. And then, there are archaeologists who know it's a pyramid. Marie Wheatley, she's not a flat earther, but she knows it's a pyramid.
Yeah.
She's been doing the elongated skulls with Brian Forrester.
Yeah. And as I was going to mention, it seems like they are systematically covering up pyramids all over the world. And yeah.
And John, if it's true then with what he thinks, Silbury Hill's one of the oldest ones. It's one of the oldest pyramids. It may be the oldest one. And all the ley lines match up to Egypt. This thing is just like, yeah, it's like we're on a computer board.
Yeah, indeed. And if you look at the work of I want to say Ryan Dunn, maybe I'm wrong, Christopher Dunn, and those guys, that they've done a lot of really interesting work. That at least the Giza pyramids appear to have been some type of a power plant, and it makes sense then that these entities would want to cover up pyramids all over the place, because if there was an ancient civilization prior to the Great Flood and perhaps prior to the last ice age that was highly advanced, highly technological, and we see remnants of this civilization all over the world, that doesn't fit very well with this whole narrative of evolution and that modern human is the pinnacle of evolution. And so, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be very prudent for them, according to their narrative, to admit that, yeah, these ancient people 10,000 years ago or whatever were much smarter and much more highly advanced than we are. So they just cover it up and call you a crazy conspiracy theorist if you talk about it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No. It's just all I put it down to, it's a bit like everybody's watching the television, but we can see behind the screen.
Yeah.
So, and that it reminded me of that. It reminded me of that picture that they like to do about Enoch, going behind the veil. Maybe the veil isn't what you think it is.
Yeah, really. So, okay, one more thing I want to mention, and you guys tell me if this is weird or not. I haven't researched it much, but I think it's kind of weird. Okay, so several years ago, a long time ago, I had my bottom right wisdom tooth pulled. And for years it's been like a hole in the back of my mouth, like, well, not a hole, but like, you know, an indentation where that tooth used to be. Well, now 5 years later or whatever, after I've had my wisdom tooth pulled, I'm pretty sure I'm growing in another one. Like,
Really?
it's starting to cut through. Yeah,
It's
it's
funny
starting
you
to
say
cut
that.
through.
I have the same, man. Seriously.
Really?
Yes.
Do you use MMS?
It's the bottom right, my back molar. Is that the one you're talking about? My wisdom tooth, yeah?
Yeah,
That's
my the bottom right side. Yeah, it's really weird because I can feel it. Like,
yeah,
it's
I can
got
feel a
little.
bone coming now or something.
Yeah,
Sounds
there's
like,
something popping up through. I don't know. I'd never heard of that before, so maybe I'm not a complete freak.
Mind you, I remember when I was little, they took a lot of my teeth out because there's too many teeth in my mouth. So maybe you've just got an extra tooth in there.
Well, it wasn't there 5 years ago. It is there now, though. It's popping up through the gum, and I already had that wisdom tooth come in and rupture. Well, it like erupted and compressed against the tooth in front of it, and got it pulled out and surgically, like, in 9 pieces. It was very painful. He didn't put me under for it, so I was awake for the whole thing, and he didn't give me enough Novocaine either. So.
But
yeah,
John, can I just rudely interrupt again? Sorry, I'm renowned
no,
for this, but this is so weird because only yesterday I think I laid my attention upon it. It's
really?
only seriously, yeah. This is synchronicity now because you're talking about it. That's why I'm laughing. I was thinking about it yesterday. I'm sure it was yesterday. I put my tongue in it, thinking, "That's weird. Why is there a tooth growing there?" And when you said it, then yeah, man, that's weird.
Yeah, like, I didn't notice it until maybe a week ago. Very recently, I was eating something and I was chewing on that side of my mouth, and I just felt like a shooting pain down the tooth in front of it, and it felt like the tooth had split down the middle straight through down to the bottom of my jaw. It really hurt, and then I got to feeling around back there. I'm like, huh, wait a minute. There isn't an indentation where that tooth used to be. There's another freaking tooth popping up, and it's cutting through the gum, and like it's a mess because, like, my wisdom teeth push all of my other teeth forward. Like, there's not quite enough room in my jaw for all of these teeth, and so what happens is it's like crushing them, and like all my wisdom teeth are bad, and all of the molars in front of them are bad, and the one wisdom tooth that I had pulled. Now there's another one coming in, and it's just wreaking havoc and damage to all that side of my mouth all over again, because again, there's not enough room in my mouth for all those damn teeth. So, but yeah, that's weird, man. But at least I feel a little bit better that it's not just me.
Yeah, is anyone in the chat also having anything to do with the teeth and the gums and regrowing teeth? But I do use coconut oil actually. I slush on that a little bit. It's nice and I eat it.
Chillers Deluxe said he's growing one as well.
So you're not odd one out then, John.
Yeah, well, that's good. So I'm not a total freak. Awesome.
John TheMorgile, you're not one of those.
Yeah. But hey, I'm about to run because I'm gonna go. I've got some stuff I got to do, and I'm gonna grab some late lunch. But it was really awesome hanging out with you guys, and I've got a couple minutes before we wrap up. I just wanted to let you know I'm about to have to bounce.
That's okay. We appreciate you coming on because you work all week now, don't you? And you've like woken up and then come on and hang out with us.
Yeah, no, it's fine though. I always enjoy talking with you guys, and it's good to good to get the UK view on things. And I want to check out some of those links that you sent me as well. So you said you Facebook messaged them to me.
Yeah, I just put a couple of Roberts in there just to show you that for him, even though he's in Mexico, they're in the northern hemisphere, his eclipse was the other way round. There was a question for you that I've just seen going up, John.
Okay.
Nimble Horse said, "Can you ask John what is his take on the AE map? Does he have an alternative?" ?
Yeah. Well, the AE map, I think it's a good tool, but I don't think it's so accurate. And the issues with it are known just by the type of map that it is. The AE map appears to be a map of the globe, hypothetically, then squashed down to an AE map. And so it has all of the inherent problems of the globe built into it, although these are known problems. So like being a cylindrical conformal map, the center of the map is most accurate, like around wherever the center happens to be. And the AE projection, that's the North Pole. So the distances going south from anywhere in the North Pole are accurately displayed. But when you're talking about going east and west along the, the rings of latitude in the AE map, that's when it gets more and more skewed, more and more stretched, up to the point of infinity at the South Pole, the further you get from the north. So in that respect, it does have issues. Although if you play around with the AE map a little bit and say place Giza in the center, then it makes a little bit more sense in some regards, although it brings other problems as well. Now, a flat earth channel called Flat Earth Crush has recently come out with an idea that I think may be worth looking into further, which is the, he calls it the TEA map. And basically what it is, it's exactly that. It's an AE map where you've got Giza in the center. And according to this map, the sun makes figure 8 circuits instead of perfectly circular circuits. But I would just say, I would like to look into that more. But in terms of getting behind like AE map as a model, I don't do that, and I never really have, except for at the beginning, because the AE map was presented to us as a model, and in fact, it's not a model any more than like the Mercator projection is a model. It's just a projection of the continents based on latitude and longitude lines, and I think it's also got the globe Earth problems built right into the AE map. So in that regard, I think that what we need to do in order to get a real map / model that we can stand behind is full-scale geodetic surveying of the far north as well as definitely the far south. And I think that that's why we have these Arctic and Antarctic treaties in place, so that we really can't flesh out what the edges of this puzzle look like. Now, one thing I do know is that the Earth isn't a spinning ball, and that's with or without any sort of model. And I don't think that we need a model to prove that the Earth is not a spinning ball. The problem is that the standard model has everything astronomically figured out to a T, and so they have all of these intricate, detailed explanations for everything that goes on in the sky. And since we don't have that in the flat Earth reality, they basically think that we're not doing science properly. But the thing is, when you question the assumptions of the ball Earth, you get all sorts of major physical problems which show that it doesn't work as a model. And so in that respect, if the ball Earth model doesn't work for things like visibility of the inner solar system after sunset, visibility of the full moon during the day, Polaris being central to all the other stars for all of history. I mean, there's lots of different astronomical problems wrong with the ball Earth model that simply cannot be rectified in the model. They're deal breakers. And so by that token, I don't think it's really necessary for us as flat earthers to stand behind one given model per se, because frankly, all the models I've seen have issues with them, whether it's the AE sort of projection or the TEA projection or even the linear projection. There are inherent problems in all of them, just like there is in the globe. And so in that respect, I think the AE projection is a good tool. It shows things like the central North Star, circumnavigation, sunrise and sunset, time zones. It explains lots of different things. And although it does have some problems, I don't think they're deal breakers. And it just goes to show you that we need to really measure the Earth, perform geometry on the extremities of it. So like if you're putting a puzzle together, normally you're going to put the corners and the edges together first, and that's your frame of reference for the rest of everything else. If you don't have those edges, and if you've got a bunch of misinformation sprinkled into your puzzle, like false pieces that don't belong to that puzzle, then you're never going to put together a working puzzle. And only at the point when we're able to really fully understand what's going on anywhere on the map and measure it and see exactly what's going on the ground in reality, then we're sort of stuck with what we've got. And again, I think the AE projection is good for some things, Although it seems to me that it does have the globe Earth model built into it, and that is a problem.
Yes, but maybe Des Walsh can put a bit of, we can learn some more things if he comes back with some good information. He says it's not going to be what you think it is, but we're waiting on that one as well, but not too long. It's been really great you've been here, John. I've just looked at the clock. I didn't realise we've been talking for nearly 2 hours. Like that went woo.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
When you're having fun, it goes really quick. And anyway, we very much appreciate you come on. It's always nice having Jon TheMorgile here.
Yeah, awesome to be here. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. It's always a pleasure. I love hearing from you, and I'm sure everyone in the chat room does too, and those that are going to listen in the future.
Yeah.
Do we want to? Should we finish the hangout now? Because obviously we're on extra today to be with John, and I did all my shopping and everything. I was just about to make the post last week, and then you messaged me to say that you had to go to work.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't have any clue until that morning. So yeah, but we got it done today, so that's good.
It doesn't matter, John. Anyway, it's always nice to talk with you. So anyway, thank you to everybody in the chat room. Flat Earth Dude, I don't know if he's there or not. Patricia, she's in the background. Patricia! And Astral, and of course, Jon TheMorgile. That was really great. Really enjoyed that. Anyway, we'll say goodbye now to everyone, and we're back on Monday. There you go. Patricia's just said hello. She's typing. Anyway, to everybody. Thank you, John.
All right, guys, take it easy.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.